Hey everyone, welcome to the Let's Actuate podcast. We're super stoked to be gathered together. We love hanging out as a team and we love sharing with you guys what we're up to. This is a conversation about what it's like to be building a company together. We're remote, we're coming from different backgrounds, and we like to build in public and share with you guys what we are doing so then you guys can take what works for you, run with it, learn from our mistakes. So real, raw, honest, and transparent. So Andrew, I'm going to toss it over to you to kind of introduce the topic for the episode today, and let's get started.
Good stuff. And thank you. One of the things that we were chatting about, because we plan really well for these conversation minutes in advance. And the first thing that felt like it might be a good transition from last week's conversation is how to be strategic about the connections that you make and the people that you bring in. Depending on what you're working on, it's really easy to put blinders on and have a focus just in this very minute aspect of what you're doing. And usually it comes with some sort of bias based on your either direct experience and what you do and how you do it, or the experiences that you've been through before, the environments that you've been through before. And I think one thing that's been really helpful as we've moved things forward here is the breadth of exposure that our first few founding members have had, and the realization of there are different perspectives out in the world, and it might not be like the quote unquote roles that you think you need to hire for first, as if you're just thinking about like business development sort of thing. So coming from aerospace and I don't know, every other industry under the sun, from my perspective, aerospace was just like one of the coolest ones that there was that I've been involved with. And it's on the forefront, really on the forefront of that industry and where it's going to go over the centuries to come. In addition to that, all of the new and emerging technologies and innovations that are taking place are happening in some aspect of deep tech. So I had an assumption that would be a cool place to start, but there's only so much that I know about it from the problem-solving perspective. So the first few people that we chose to bring on are people that we had that I had had previous relations with. So Nicole, who's been on the podcast many a times, was our first companion in the ideation. Obviously, Carolina and I birthed this idea together. She pulled it out of me and kind of motivated me to take action. But Nicole was really the one to say, "Hey, let's bring this to life." And she is an actuator. She takes action on the things that are put in front of her. So it made sense. Me being a very visionary and starting things and thinking from a strategic perspective, to pair myself with somebody who can help, one, with the workload that we're going to bring in, and secondly, take that and really, really run with it, so that I can go on and focus on what the next thing is, and we can kind of get that wheel turning. And very shortly thereafter, I just so happened to catch up with Chris and let him know that we were up to what we were up to, see what he was up to. And there was really, really good alignment there. And Chris brought in for, obviously, we pair really well in the work that we do, but I brought in for another reason altogether. Our working chemistry has been such that he's very grounded and practical and analytical and has a healthy level of skepticism. Where I, on the other hand, am very hopeful and optimistic and visionary and literally shoot for the stars. So it's a nice synthesis that we have. So to translate that into the few things that I personally took when getting off the ground. And Chris, I'll volleyball this over to you in a second. Didn't say popcorn. How can we support the work that we need to do and build a team that can execute on the different things that need to be done, focusing on the skill set and the balance of the dynamics that need to be played to actuate that. So having somebody that can put a plan together and keep running forward while people are pretty much building the road while it's done. And the other aspect of that is how do you surround yourself with people with complementary and different perspectives than you that create this nice pool of dynamism in the way that problems are approached, situations are approached in the business and things like that. So the very practical, what do we need to do and who's going to do those things? And then how do we make sure that we're bringing different perspectives into the problem solving process? And then Chris, I'll pass it on to you.
So thanks, Andrew. Basically, being brought in as a co-founder was really exciting. It's not my first rodeo, and so I was very hesitant in terms of like, oh, someone has an idea, right? Andrew and I we've been pitched ideas because we've been creators, and then on the other side, our engineering friends also the same thing. Oh, we have an idea. Let's try to make something. And most of the time, 99% of the time, people that have ideas, they're not worthless, but they're definitely not. They're very ineffectual. My recent go-to analogy is like the Silicon Valley startup that I saw, which was like self-acupuncture for dogs. I was like, why does this need to be an app? Why does it exist? Who's using it? Why is it a SaaS service that costs $30 a month, right? And good luck holding down your dog to put needles in it, right? And you're like, yeah, I have an idea and I have all of the workings to make something work, but should you make it work? Those are the type of things that happen quite a bit. And so I hear someone's like, oh, Andrew's reaching out to me. And going like, I have this thing. It's like, well, you got to tell me more. You got to flesh it out. You got to like not shoot for the stars because I need to know that it's not just commitment. Like people commit themselves to a restaurant 24/7 and they still fail, right? So how are you supposed to be a business owner first and an idea person in complementary to that? Because what we have right now is like a large team. And as such, as leaders and facilitators, we have a responsibility to others on the team to not just be pie in the sky, sweat equity, but like we got to put food on the table. We got to meet our needs first and foremost. And if we can't do that, this dream is going to be made by someone else, right? That can actuate. So once I found out that Andrew we had something that we could work on and actuate on, then it became very clear that it wasn't a pipe dream and it was achievable. And when we think about other people that we're bringing on, it's about not just their capabilities. It's like, oh, can Lori perform X and Y and Z? It's like, yeah, great. What does Z do? What does Nicole do? What does some of our other members do? If all we were looking for was talent, I would just post jobs on some job board and I would find talent, because there's right now in this time, there's a ton of talent. There's like 4,000 times more talent per job posting than there was 2 years ago. So I have my pick, but I want people first, and then like the marginal difference in skills are worth far less than their ability to be a person to me. So right now, early in our stage, it's more important that we have people that complement each other rather than just the raw skill set. That's just my opinion. As we scale out to a larger organization, then we'll put in full on processes. And we go like, what does onboarding look like? What does full on payroll and all this stuff? And all those administrative things will be solved. I know we know how to solve them, but spending that attention span, that mind share right now is not optimal. I think for others on the call, Lori or Z, I'm sure that you have your own insights into from your experience working with tons of other startups and small and large organizations. Like, how do you vibe check?
Yeah, I'll hop in here. So I, like you, in the marketing side, I get pitched a lot of times. Hey, like I got an idea, and do you want to like work with it and sweat equity kind of stuff? It's gonna go to the moon, kind of thing. And I'm like, so did the last 10 people who I talked to, sort of a deal. So yeah, so as a founder, as an entrepreneur, number one is really, great ideas are awesome, and you really do, like you said, Chris, really have to figure out like the problem, and is it big enough? Is there enough people that are going to want it? And also start thinking about, are you a startup? Are you a small business? So there's a lot of different questions to ask yourself before you even go look for the people to work with you, because you do have to define, I have this idea. What is it? What is it going to be? Take Andrew's idea of like, yeah, let's shoot for the stars. Great. But what does it look like? How are we formatting and structuring it? So there's a lot of questions that you need to ask before you start asking other people to join in on you, because lots of people have great ideas, and like you said, they're not worthless, but they got to be actionable and actually put food on the table. The other thing that I'd see is that I work with a lot of startups, and they connected with their buddies. They had a great idea, and their buddy is their best friend. They work well together. They got a tight connection, and then I see it go downhill really fast. Just because you're friends doesn't mean you work well together. And so if you are looking for somebody to work well, a great book is the EOS system, the traction rocket fuel, where they talk about you've got to have the visionary. That's where I was really inspired by Andrew and Chris, because Andrew is the visionary. He's like, let's go to the stars. We got this big idea. He's got big dreams and very optimistic and positive and encouraging and motivating. But then you have to have the integrator. And that's the person that says, okay, great idea. What are the steps to get there? What's the processes? What does that look like in a real life scenario situation? And so if you are a visionary with a great, big, awesome idea, you want to look for people who aren't just jumping on board going, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And then you guys both dream all day long. You want to find that integrator that's going to go, that's a great idea. Let's put that down in a process and see what that looks like, to see if what these projections we're imagining we can actually hit. And so it's rocket fuel. There's 3 books in the whole entire system, but really to figure out, okay, I'm a visionary. I need an integrator. If you're an integrator and you've got processes, look for that visionary, and you guys are both going to work really well together. So yeah, number one is make sure that before you start saying, hey, I got a great idea, and bringing people on board, and then it's mass chaos because you don't know if you are a startup, you're a small business, are you going to bootstrap, are you going to go for funding, and all those kinds of questions that need to be answered first. And the other thing is that you don't want to just pick your buddies. You want to pick operators and the people who are going to mesh well in a not just personality, but in a business sense of everybody's going to get their job done, because you all are founders of your piece of the business. And so that's my two pieces of advice for those who are got great ideas. Go find an integrator.
Yeah, that was basically like Andrew and I early on, and it reminds me of my buddies who tried to pitch me on ideas that absolutely did not want to be challenged in their approach. Whereas Andrew, I kept hitting him over and over. It's like, It's like, do you want to get funding? You don't know yet? We'll figure it out. Like, you need to answer the questions that you need to answer. And here are the questions that I'm asking, right? What are these terms? How are we going to do this? And then as those things gained clarity, I realized he is the type of person that responded well and would actually solve the problems rather than just like sit on the idea and then the spirit, and then burn the ship to the ground.
Yeah, I would say too, you can't just use, oh, I'm a visionary as an excuse either. There's been a lot of founders who are like, well, I have this idea, but I'm not I'm not an execution, I'm not a good processes, or I don't have good organization. It's like, well, you're kind of leading the company. you kind of need to figure some stuff out, and if not, then like Andrew did, hand a good portion of control and the reins over to somebody who can, and be humble enough to understand that working together, you're going to get further than just, holding on to your idea and not, iterating on it. So well done, guys. That's why I joined the team.
Cool. And thank you. And to speak to that a little bit as well, you won't always know, you never will always know all the things all the time. And you might get into a good rhythm at the beginning, but it's very often that you'll probably have to pivot to some degree. And that's okay. Just continue to put pen to paper and figure things out. The process that I had when I started all of this, even like my note-taking process and my documentation process on all the things that were happening, has shifted dramatically. And it's gotten to the point again where I'm on my 4th or 5th phase of what that looks like. And I had to create an entirely new system to keep track of the scale of things. And what Lori was talking about with handing off the reins, we're now to a point where there's so much happening all at once, putting people in place that can run with, and execute and have ownership of what makes sense. Like you can't do absolutely everything as a leader. And that goes from the very top all the way down to the bottom, because there will be things that you lead, initiatives that you lead, that you take charge of, and you need to know that as you create a team that you can depend on, based on everything that we chatted about before, depend on them, let them own it, run with it. Z, what is your experience been like? Not just here, which I'd love to hear what your perspective of the transition and evolution of everything is, but also being a founder yourself with your own company, and what do those two things look like beside each other?
So I've had like a bunch of different things that come to mind, and the first thing I'm thinking about is like working with friends and what that's like. And it has to be like a very unique type of individual where you can separate out the two aspects and then maintain the friendship afterwards. And some people just are not cut out for that. It's sort of, business and friendship. If they mix, things get very messy and crazy. Some people it's very well suited for. And I like to think that the people I'm closest with, like my good friends, I do business with them too, because that's what I want. Like that's what I want from someone who's actually a friend, that sort of trust capability, that same headspace. And I've also seen the difference between what Lori was talking about, sort of having operators versus, the dreamer, the person who can execute. And these are all separate skills. And I don't think one person ever really can encompass them all. Because right now, if someone's a CEO, a lot of what that entails is sort of having the dream and then being able to fundraise. In order for you to be able to fundraise, to be able to be a full-on operator, it's weird almost, because to be able to fundraise, it's a very specific type of personality. And I'd say there's an aspect of sort of extrovert, introvert. I don't really like those terms, but the ability to kind of go out and talk about it and also be serious about it. To then go ahead and operate requires much more kind of going into yourself, which is harder for someone who's kind of in that position. So there's this need to kind of have this bunch of individuals who can work on something, which is kind of why a company exists, right? It's this amalgamation of different people. And that's what gives you the ability to actually operate. That's sort of like the stack of items that's required. Yeah, it's funny. I was noticing when I was meeting with a few companies this week, I felt kind of weird thinking this when I was talking with some of the founders, but you can kind of suss out, like, okay, this guy is CEO now, but he might be better as a COO. Okay, this guy's whatever, he's kind of just helping out. He should possibly be in like a CEO position because he can definitely fundraise. And it's weird because people kind of see that like top position is okay, that's the top. It's very specific, to be able to kind of get the duties done as a CEO. Reality is some of the founders who are that dreamer, that ability to do things, they actually can operate a lot better than they can fundraise, which is interesting to see.
For anyone listening, it's okay to not be CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I have plans in place for the things that we're doing so that I'm not the CEO as part of those, because there's something really nice about contributing to a space in which people can step into and be their best selves, and do what they love and do what makes them thrive, or create an environment for them to discover that and become that. I think that's what most excites me about what we're doing here. And Carolina, how's it been for you, being in a position where you're normally at like a corporate level where you're thinking like very tactically about putting people on, again, with consideration to all the different aspects we've been talking about, putting people on certain projects to accomplish certain things, and then now being in an environment where that's scaled to a significant magnitude?
It's it's insane actually to be able to witness everything that is happening right now with the company and like have such a completely different perspective from before. I think that one of the reasons why a company can be very successful is because you are very um, you have like a really good intention on the people, especially the foundation people that you're picking to be part of your team, and it's really important for you to trust them. It's you know that the people that you're choosing, you can let them operate on their realm without hesitation, without any doubt, and they'll perform to their best because that's in their nature. And rather than being on the opposite side, like I feel like more on the corporate side, there's a lot of pride, but also entitlement that comes with your position. Oh, I hold this executive position. Like, who are you, analyst or just a region manager, to reach out to me and ask me about these? Like, there's a lot of like, it almost becomes like the higher you go on the scale at a corporate level, especially for big companies, it seems like the more untouchable they think they are. And they don't turn to look back to when they were in that position from the very beginning, like probably from the beginning of their career. And I think it's a matter of like trusting your people. No, like I remember even when we just started and it was just me, you, and Nicole, and we talked to her, and it was like, we are the type of company that if it takes you 3 hours to do your homework for the whole week, great. That's it. I'm not gonna control you. I'm not gonna be breathing down your neck to be like, hey, you gotta be connected, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. And if it takes you at the beginning, I don't know, 50 or 60 hours, we know that eventually you're gonna be able to work it out. So you don't have to spend as much time doing this because it's gonna come second nature to you. But I think it's a matter of like having trust in your people. I think it's really important to know who you're surrounding yourself with. And I'm a very like I would say that a very intuitive person. So when I see something that it's not aligned, I'm the first one on raising the flags and being like, no, you know what? I think there's a disconnection here. I don't think this person fits in well. And even in prior opportunities before even this company, like you can ask Andrew, I will meet up with people, with really high people from his company, prior companies, and now tell him, you know what, I don't know what it is about this person, but there's something off. I just can't pinpoint it, and there's no way for me to explain it, right? And a lot of people are gonna be skeptical and it's like, what's she talking about? But 10 out of 10, I will be on point. And we will look back and we're like, oh, okay, there's a reason there. And we ended up discovering something else that wasn't aligned with what we wanted at the moment, right? So I think it's really, for me, it's refreshing to see, and I would like it to be something that it's ingrained in the culture, that as we grow, this keeps going down to all the channels and all the people that are in, because I want to make sure that we have leaders that they trust their people, they know who they're working with, and they are not trying to control them. Because at the end of the day, if you think you have to control everything, then that's on you. You have something going on that you need to solve, that it's beyond a company. It's within you. So yeah, that's my perspective and my take on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I can attest to her 100% accuracy streak, but I think that's innate in human nature. I think more people are maybe just either more tuned in to themselves or more accepting of what they feel, but we're energetic beings, right? And there's an age-old saying that's been around for who knows how long. Trust your gut. There's physical energetic shifts when something's a little off with an individual or a circumstance or a situation or a relationship or an idea, whatever it is. Just trust yourself. And that definitely plays a lot into it.
I was going to, well, what you said just kind of spurred a thought on too, and piggyback off of Carolina, is like, there are no egos allowed when you're building a startup, and that's where we all come in. We all have these expertise and all these, ideas, and that's where everything that we've talked about, we all are bringing something to the table, but you can't have an ego and be in a startup, because there's got to be give and take. There's got to be iterations. You've got to, what they say, there's no sacred cows. Like you got to cut stuff if it's not working, and you got to pick stuff up that, roll your sleeves up. And it is in the trenches. We're all here building something, and especially with Actuate Ventures, something of big impact. We all have to take advice, be able to give advice as well. And so I think that's another thing when you are building a startup and you are looking for those people, like you said, it's not just about talent. It is about the ability to be able to work together in a very humble kind of a way, and see and respect each other. And that also means enough to call out any BS that is happening. So be able to give and take in that aspect too. So yeah, that was a thought I had while I heard both of you guys talking.
Yeah, I love that. And when you check your ego at the door and you have spaces where people can come together and communicate, you can solve any problem. You can build anything. And it's a rarity, though, to see in society dynamics and spaces where people can come to the table and feel comfortable enough to even say something, let alone to have a conversation and work through something. It's one of the whole reasons that we're building this ourselves, is to create a space like that for people. at its really foundation, right? The advancement of humanity, fantastic vision. But the birthing of doing something on our own was sprung from multiple environments where we're like, that's off, or that was horrible, or that's an experience I never want to have again in my professional career. And so it's really nice to hear that we're we're starting to create spaces where people can bring things up and we can talk about it. We're humans. We're people. We all have our own feelings, our thoughts, our own expressions, our own interpretations. Most of the time, what you communicate, it's a two-way channel. What you say, how you say it, how it's received and interpreted. There's so much that could change on both sides of that. It's okay to validate that things are understood or were misunderstood, and then you can move past them, right? Like time progresses. And I think if everybody brings their best to the table, and we realize that everybody has good intentions here, as long as you do your vibe checks, right? There are some ill players in the world. But I think if you just assume that, not everybody's out for themselves. They want to make something work in their lives. They want peace and tranquility and stability and to make their own hopes and dreams come true. And I think if you meet at a very human level, you could work through any kind of problem. So yeah, I love that. And that kind of eases us into one of the other topics we want to touch on, which is like how you approach diversity and inclusion in our endeavors. And I think it starts with not thinking of it from the traditional diversity and inclusion that we know today in 2024, that it's a thing that's actively pursued, but just creating a very natural human environment where you respect and appreciate people in general, and value different perspectives and different dynamics. And that's really what adds robustness and fulfillment to like personal environments, let alone professional ones. And all interactions with other people are personal engagements first. So I'm gonna throw the stone in the pond out to anybody that wants to chime in on that topic in particular.
Yeah, I think the perspective of inclusion to me always came from the aspect of not existing in an echo chamber, which is funny because my audio is echoing, but that's all good. But it's often where you can, by mistake, have a friend group or a business group, kind of things like that, where everyone's kind of like, yeah, it's a great idea. And like, it's not a great idea. Either people are afraid or they just want to like continuously say yes. Nobody has opposition. Reality is you kind of want people who are going to give you pushback, and not from, a personal perspective, like someone mentioned earlier, where it's about ego. Like, no, I don't like that because it's not me. It's like, no, because, hey, I have a different perspective. Let me tell it to you. And then you kind of work it out. You don't want to have to, self-censor, like things like that. You want to be able to bring all the options to the table, have someone who thinks about it from a different perspective, so that you can kind of get the best thing, right? It's like, imagine you're making a marble statue and you didn't realize you had to chip off part of the leg to make it look perfect, like to perfectly round out that, calf muscle. And, someone comes along and they say, hey, the calf muscle has a little more of a roundness. You want that. You want to hear that. And you go, yeah, cool. Let me work on that. That's where kind of the diversifying your own brain comes in. And it's important. You don't want yes men. It doesn't work. It feels good, takes you nowhere.
So on when I think of the DEI situation that we see in the modern culture, is a lot of it to me personally is like lip service. It's just hand wave. We check some boxes without really understanding what it means to actually create any diversity. And a lot of the diversity that I see being ham-fisted into organizations or our culture overall ends up just creating more tension. Very like Michael Scott Office-esque in its approach. You're like, okay, cool. What a truly worthwhile experience this has been. So when you're down on the floor and you actually have proper inclusion, it's about understanding and empathizing with other people and their situations. It doesn't have to be you have this race and this race or this culture. It could be the person who grew up with you next door or your own family member. in a slightly different situation, right? I didn't realize until, and maybe you're today years old when you learn this as well, but some people aren't allowed bank accounts due to criminal history or some other aspects. So knowing that, I had friends growing up whose parents didn't have bank accounts, and therefore they themselves as children couldn't open bank accounts through their parents. And other parents were like, oh, I opened little Timmy a credit card at 14, and now he has credit when he's 18. That's a leg up. And that perspective is like, okay, what am I trying to bring? Whose voices, whose ideas am I bringing to the table are not just people in the same realm as myself, right? Innovation is going to happen because you're seeing interesting fusions between things. That's why we're so interested in deep tech. That's why we're so interested in aerospace, because we really think that those areas are ripe full of knock-on effect innovations. What has the asphalt and concrete done in their myopia in the last 50 years? There has been improvements to the road qualities, but we still get potholes and we still get a bunch of other things, right? But we're looking for things that we think we can sneak in and really like accelerate innovation in places that were gate kept originally. And to do that, we need more differences in our perspectives. And to do that, we have to improve our empathy with each other. Gatekeeping your ego at the door also means checking your ego at the door also means checking your understanding of each other, or your bias towards other ideas at the door as well.
I mean, I'll jump in again too. I mean, Nicole is off screen, but even just like on the spot, you can see that it's a split, girls to guys, as far as the core group, and that wasn't even like you guys both said, it wasn't like, oh, we're doing this so we can stay DEI compliant. It was just, looking at each other as we are all humans with some value to add, and that, that's, I don't know. That's really, this is a sensitive subject, but it's something that is really something I have been paying attention to, because as a woman, there's two camps sort of deal, where it's like, the down with the patriarchy kind of group. But that's where I really feel like, it's important, and it's been very prevalent here with our team, that there's a yin and yang. There is need for both. There's need for everybody. There's need for the diverse backgrounds and experiences. And it really does come down to, removing labels, where we are all of the human race. And again, we all bring value because of who we are, not where we come from or what we look like or anything like that. There are people who have disadvantages. But I will also note that I'm very impressed with the people who don't stay in the victim mindset, but they see that, and we can recognize that. But it is also something where they are using that to actively improve their life and for everyone around them. And so something that Andrew, you and we've talked about, and I'm even, working on a project of my own where, women don't get as much funding as, as men in the VC world. But to also proceed with that a little bit further, but what we do get, we magnify, we amplify, the money we receive, the way we're able to gather resources and network and nurture and create relationships and things like that. So I like let's not ignore that women don't get as much VC funding, but what we've got, we magnify. And so I think there's the whole story needs to be told, and there are lessons to be learned from both parts of that sentence. And so I think that again, coming at it from, we are from the human race. We have not been taken over by AI or aliens yet. Yeah. And we all have something to contribute, and looking at each other because of, the connection being another person with a soul, and that energy, connecting to each other on an energetic level is something to really focus on.
And I think it's really important that we're taking this approach, which isn't necessarily an approach that we're taking, right? It's just happening naturally, everything that's being spoken to. In the industries that we're in. So specifically in deep tech, specifically in aerospace, because we're literally building the future. We're doing it in a really collaborative way, not just here within our ecosystem that we're creating, but in the various aspects of the industry as a whole, from the world of VC through to the aerospace industries, through to military and government, through to all of the different things in tech that we're going to touch, from software to hardware and things like that. It is very important to have that perspective. We are people first. Everybody brings a wealth of experience, and leaning into that and knowing that we're creating a space, or intending to, I should say, make it actionable for all of you. Moving forward and intending to create a space where people can come together and work toward a goal, have a safe space to bring up concerns and opposing perspectives and opinions, and be empowered to do so. It's okay to be told that you're wrong about something you might have had an assumption of that you weren't aware of. Happens probably a lot more than you think, and nobody's telling you about it. So it's great to have a space where people will. But it's really, really, really important to come together and have those safe spaces to build the future together, on an individual level, on an entity level, so the different groups and organizations working together. It's the only way that we're going to create a future that we've been dreaming of as humanity as a whole, for society to come together and create this future and create ecosystems where it makes sense for all people, right? So yeah, happy that it's happening naturally here, but I'm very, very aware that it does not happen naturally elsewhere. But I think it's because of the fact that we were intentional with creating a space like that. So as you move forward in whatever you are building, in whatever you are part of, whatever teams that you're on, whatever projects you're on, whoever your team members are, whoever your friends and family are, move forward with an intention to create a space where you feel safe talking about anything, where you can voice your opinion and be heard and correct somebody on an assumption that maybe they had that they believe is fact, or create a space within yourself if you're on the other end of that, so people can approach you with those same scenarios and you can learn from those around you. And I think that's what's going to move us toward the future that we want to create. And on that note, if anybody wants to chime in on any thoughts afterward, you're welcome to. But I do want to share a quote that we've come up with recently, like how a rising tide lifts all boats, rising stars illuminate all worlds. And that's what we're hoping to empower here with everybody that we interact with. Thank you, ChatGPT.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. Love this episode. Make sure that you subscribe, follow us, connect with us on LinkedIn and the social channels, and we'll see y'all next week.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.